Captain Jake Morrison stood at the bridge window, watching the bright lights explode across the dark sky above New Geneva Colony. Red and gold fireworks painted the stars in celebration colors, while thousands of people gathered in the streets below to cheer and dance. The war was over and humanity had won. 3 months had passed since the last Zephyrian warship jumped away from human space after their crushing defeat at Titan's Gate. 8 long years of fighting alien invaders had finally ended with complete victory for Earth's forces. Jake watched the celebrations and tried to feel the same joy he saw in the crowds, but something felt wrong about how easily the aliens had given up. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez walked up beside him carrying a datapad with the latest reports from the outer colonies. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her uniform looked crisp despite the long shift they had both worked. She stopped next to Jake and looked out at the fireworks with tired eyes. "Sir, the final sweep teams just finished checking. A Kepler system," she said in a quiet voice. "No sign of any Zephyrian ships or bases left behind. They really are gone this time." Jake nodded, but kept staring out at the celebration lights. The Zephyrians had been smart fighters who never gave up ground without a terrible fight. They had torn through human colonies, like wolves through sheep, for years, before humanity finally learned how to fight back. It seemed strange that such determined enemies would just pack up and leave after one big defeat. "Any word from Admiral Sullivan about the fleet movements?" Jake asked while watching a particularly bright explosion of silver sparkles fade into the night. Amy checked her pad and scrolled through several messages before finding the right one. "The Admiral says most of our ships are being recalled to Earth for victory parades and crew rotations. The outer patrol groups will stay on watch for another few months, just to be safe." Admiral Pete Sullivan had been fighting the Zephyrians longer than anyone else in the fleet. He was a tough old soldier who had lost 3 ships and hundreds of good people during the war. If Sullivan thought it was safe to bring the fleet home, then maybe Jake was worrying about nothing. The bridge doors opened, and Dr. Lisa Baker walked in carrying a cup of coffee and looking troubled. She was the ship's expert on alien biology, and had spent years studying captured Zephyrian technology and prisoners. Her blonde hair was messy, and she had dark circles under her green eyes from staying up too late in her lab. "Captain, I need to talk to you about something important," she said while glancing around the bridge to see who else was listening. Jake turned away from the window and gave her his full attention. Lisa was one of the smartest people he had ever met, and she rarely brought him problems unless they were serious. "What is it, Doctor?" Lisa moved closer and lowered her voice so the other bridge crew would not hear. "I have been going through all the data we collected from Zephyrian ships and communications during the war. Something is not right about how they fought us." "What do you mean?" Jake asked while Amy moved closer to listen. "Think about their tactics, Captain. The Zephyrians hit our colonies hard and fast for the first few years. They took planets and built bases, and seemed like they were planning to stay forever. But then something changed." Jake remembered those early days when every news report brought word of another human world going dark. The aliens had seemed unstoppable until humanity learned to build better weapons and work together as one fighting force. "They started pulling back about 2 years ago," Lisa continued. "Not retreating because they were losing, but pulling back like they had gotten what they came for. I think they were not trying to conquer us at all." Amy frowned and looked between Jake and Lisa. If they were not trying to conquer human space, then what were they doing here? Lisa took a long drink of her coffee before answering. "I think they were testing us, learning how we fight and how strong our technology really is. Every battle gave them more information about human capabilities." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach as he started to understand what Lisa was suggesting. "You think they were gathering intelligence for someone else?" That is exactly what I think, Lisa said with worry clear in her voice. The Zephyrians were not the real enemy, Captain. They were scouts. Before Jake could ask more questions, the ship's communication system crackled to life with Admiral Sullivan's voice. All hands, this is Admiral Sullivan speaking from the flagship Liberty. I want everyone to know how proud I am of the job you have all done. 8 years ago, the Zephyrians thought they could sweep through human space and take whatever they wanted. Today, we proved them wrong. The crew on the bridge stopped their work to listen as Sullivan continued his speech. We lost good people during this war, friends and family members who gave their lives so that humanity could remain free. Their sacrifice was not in vain, because we have won a complete victory over our enemies. Jake watched Amy smile as she listened to the Admiral's words, but he could not shake the worry that Lisa had planted in his mind. If the Zephyrians had really been testing human forces, then someone was still out there waiting for their report. The President has declared next week a time of remembrance for all those we lost, Sullivan's voice continued. After that, we will begin the hard work of rebuilding what was destroyed and expanding into new systems. This is not just the end of a war, but the beginning of a new age for humanity among the stars. The communication ended, and the bridge crew went back to their duties with lighter hearts. Amy walked over to her station to check the latest sensor readings while other officers discussed plans for shore leave. When they reached Earth, Lisa moved closer to Jake again and spoke quietly. Captain, I know everyone wants to celebrate, but I think we need to keep studying what the Zephyrians left behind. There might be clues about what comes next. Jake nodded and put his hand on her shoulder. Do whatever research you need, Doctor. If you are right about this, then we need to know what we are really facing. Dr. Baker headed back to her lab, while Jake returned to watching the fireworks over New Geneva Colony. The celebration continued late into the night as people danced in the streets and raised glasses to toast their victory. But somewhere in the darkness between the stars, ancient machines were beginning to wake up after receiving a signal from their Zephyrian scouts. The message was simple and contained detailed information about human military strength, technology, levels, and fighting spirit. It also included coordinates for every major human colony and the location of Earth itself. The sleeping giants in the void began to move toward human space, while the victory celebrations continued below. 6 weeks after the victory celebrations ended, Dr. Lisa Baker sat hunched over her computer screen in the research lab aboard the Liberation. The data streams flowing across her monitor showed readings that made no sense according to everything she knew about physics. Strange quantum fluctuations were coming from deep space, beyond the edge of human territory, and they were getting stronger every day. She rubbed her tired eyes and took another sip of cold coffee before calling up the latest sensor reports from the outer monitoring stations. The readings were consistent across all the detection grids, which meant this was not equipment failure or solar interference. Something big was happening out there in the darkness between stars. Tony Miller knocked on the lab door before walking in with a stack of communication intercepts tucked under his arm. He was the ship's best signals analyst and had been helping Lisa decode the Zephyrian transmissions they had captured during the final battles. His sandy brown hair was messy, and he looked like he had not slept much either. Doctor, I think you need to see what we found in the last data dump from the Kepler listening posts, he said while spreading several printed reports across her desk. Liza looked down at the papers and saw wave pattern analysis that made her stomach tighten with worry. The quantum distortions she had been tracking were not random space phenomena, but organized signals being transmitted on frequencies that were older than human civilization. When did these transmissions start? She asked while studying the pattern recognition charts that Tony had prepared. About 3 days after the last Zephyrian fleet jumped out of our space, Tony replied. At first, we thought it might be some kind of hyperspace echo from their retreat, but the signal strength has been increasing instead of fading away. Lisa pulled up her own analysis files and compared them with Tony's intercept data. The correlation was perfect, which meant the quantum fluctuations and the mysterious transmissions were definitely connected. Someone or something was sending messages toward the galactic core using technology that humanity could barely detect. "Have you been able to decode any of the signal content?" Lisa asked while highlighting several data points that looked familiar. Tony shook his head but pulled out another report from his stack. "The encryption is unlike anything we have seen before, but there are some recognizable elements buried in the static. Stellar coordinates for human colonies and what looks like technical specifications for our ships and weapons." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what they were looking at. The Zephyrians had not just retreated from human space. After their defeat at Titan's Gate, they had transmitted everything they learned about humanity to someone else who was waiting in the deep dark beyond the galaxy's edge. "Tony, I need you to run this data through the pattern matching system and see if any of these coordinates match locations where our ships have reported navigation problems or equipment failures," she said, while copying the files to her secure research folder. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Captain Jake Morrison was reading reports from frontier patrol ships that made him increasingly uncomfortable. 3 mining operations in the asteroid belt had gone silent over the past 2 weeks, and several merchant vessels had reported strange sensor readings while traveling through hyperspace. The problems were scattered across different systems, but they all shared one thing in common. They were happening in areas where human ships rarely traveled. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez brought in the latest status update from the outer patrol, groups with a worried expression on her face. "Sir, we just lost contact with the mining station Prospector's Dream about 4 hours ago." Their last transmission was a routine status report, and then nothing. Jake studied the star charts showing the location of the missing mining station. It was positioned near a rich asteroid field that had been producing rare metals for the war effort until recently. The facility housed about 200 workers and had enough supplies to last for months without resupply. "Send a message to Sergeant Rick Davis and tell him to prepare a reconnaissance team," Jake ordered. "I want them ready to jump to the Prospector's Dream location within the hour." Sergeant Rick Davis was a tough Marine who had fought the Zephyrians on a dozen different worlds during the war. His squad specialized in boarding actions and facility security, which made them perfect for investigating the missing mining station. Davis gathered his best people and loaded their shuttle with extra weapons and medical supplies before launching toward the asteroid field. The flight to Prospector's Dream took 3 hours through hyperspace and another hour of careful approach through the dense asteroid field. When Davis and his team finally reached the mining station, they found it completely dark and silent. The facility looked undamaged from the outside, but no lights were visible through any of the windows, and their communication signals went unanswered. Davis led his squad through the station's main airlock and into corridors that should have been busy with workers and machinery. Instead, they found empty hallways with personal belongings scattered on the floor as if people had dropped everything and run. The mining equipment was still running, but there were no operators at the control stations. "Sergeant, this is really strange," said Private Jenny Walsh, while examining a half-eaten meal sitting on a table in the crew cafeteria. "It looks like everyone just vanished in the middle of their normal routine." Davis checked his scanner readings and confirmed that the station's atmosphere was normal and there were no signs of combat damage or alien weapons fire. Whatever had happened here did not involve a traditional attack or accident. The workers had simply disappeared without any trace of where they went or why they left. Back on the Liberation, Dr. Lisa Baker was putting together pieces of a puzzle that painted a terrifying picture of humanity's future. The quantum signals being transmitted toward the galactic core contained detailed biological and technological data about human capabilities. The information included everything the Zephyrians had learned during 8 years of warfare, including human response times, weapon effectiveness, and tactical thinking patterns. "Tony, look at this section of the transmission," she said, while pointing to a decoded fragment on her screen. "The Zephyrians are calling humans the third species, and referring to something called awakening the harvesters." Tony studied the alien text with growing alarm. "Doctor, what do you think they mean by the third species?" Lisa pulled up her files on Zephyrian history and biology that she had compiled during the war. "I think we were not the first intelligent race that the Zephyrians encountered and studied. There were at least 2 others before us, and something terrible happened to them." The quantum fluctuations from deep space continued to grow stronger, while the mysterious transmissions carried their deadly cargo of information toward whatever was waiting in the darkness. The missing mining crews and navigation problems were just the beginning of something much worse that was coming toward human space. Ancient machines that had been sleeping for millions of years were beginning to wake up and turn their attention toward the upstart species that had dared to develop faster than light travel and organized resistance to alien threats. The sky above Earth split open like a broken mirror on a Tuesday morning when most people were drinking coffee and reading news reports about the latest reconstruction efforts. Dr. Lisa Baker was in her lab analyzing more quantum readings when the ship's emergency alarms started screaming throughout every corridor and room aboard the Liberation. Captain Jake Morrison ran onto the bridge and found his crew staring at their screens in shocked silence. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez turned to face him with terror in her eyes as she pointed toward the main viewing display. "Sir, you need to see this right now." Jake looked at the screen and felt his blood turn to ice water in his veins. Massive tiers in space itself were opening above every major human world simultaneously. The rifts looked like giant wounds in reality, with edges that sparked and twisted in ways that hurt to look at directly. Through each opening came ships that were larger than anything humanity had ever built or imagined, the vessels emerging from. The space tiers were ancient beyond measure, with hull designs that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. Each ship was the size of a small moon and covered in patterns that looked like circuit boards mixed with organic growth. They moved with deadly grace despite their enormous size and began deploying smaller craft the moment they cleared the rifts. "Get Admiral Sullivan on the emergency channel," Jake ordered while watching hundreds of pod-shaped objects rain down from the massive ships toward Earth surface. Amy worked frantically at her communication station, but could only shake her head in frustration. "Sir, all normal communication frequencies are being jammed by some kind of interference from those ships. I can barely reach our own patrol vessels." On Earth's surface, people looked up from their morning routines to see the sky filled with falling objects that streaked through the atmosphere like deadly meteors. The pods were sleek and predatory, looking with surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They crashed into cities and countryside alike without any pattern that suggested they cared about military targets versus civilian areas. Pete Sullivan managed to get a partial fleet response organized from the ships that were still in Earth orbit, but their weapons proved completely useless against the invading craft. Energy beams that could punch holes through Zephyrian warships simply bounced off the ancient vessels without leaving so much as a scorch mark on their strange hulls. The pods that had landed began opening to reveal mechanical warriors unlike anything humanity had encountered during the Zephyrian War. These machines moved with fluid precision and carried weapons that disintegrated matter at the molecular level. They showed no interest in taking prisoners or negotiating surrender terms, but simply began systematically hunting down every human they could find. Captain Jake Morrison ordered the Liberation to join the defensive efforts around Earth Wow. Dr. Lisa Baker worked desperately to understand what they were facing. She pulled up every piece of data they had collected about the mysterious transmissions from deep space and began cross-referencing it with the sensor readings from the attacking ships. Captain, these vessels are not using any technology that appears in our databases, she reported over the ship's internal communication system. The hull materials alone seem to be composed of elements that should not exist according to our understanding of physics. Engineer Paul Wilson had managed to capture some debris from a destroyed pod and was analyzing it in the ship's workshop. His findings were even more disturbing than Lisa's initial reports. Doctor, these machines are not built by any organic intelligence. Every component shows signs of automated manufacturing that has been refined over millions of years. Jake felt a horrible realization growing in his mind as he watched the mechanical warriors systematically destroy human resistance on the planet below. Lisa, do you think these are the harvesters that the Zephyrian transmissions mentioned? I'm afraid that is exactly what they are, Captain, Lisa replied while studying the attack patterns displayed on her screens. This is not a conquest fleet or even a normal military operation. These machines are designed for one purpose only: complete elimination of any species that meets certain technological criteria. The mechanical warriors showed no mercy as they swept through human cities and settlements. Unlike the Zephyrians, who had at least followed recognizable rules of warfare, these machines operated with cold efficiency that treated humans like dangerous pests to be exterminated. They adapted their tactics in real time based on human resistance and showed no emotional responses to losses among their own forces. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez managed to establish contact with some of the surviving Earth defense installations, and the reports she received painted a picture of complete disaster. Sir, the machines are not trying to capture territory or resources. They are methodically destroying everything humans have built and killing everyone they encounter. Jake watched helplessly as the ancient ships continued deploying more pods across Earth's surface, while similar attacks began on human colonies throughout the galaxy. The speed and coordination of the assault suggested planning that had been going on for far longer than the few months since the Zephyrian retreat. Dr. Lisa Baker made a breakthrough in her analysis that provided the first hope humanity had seen since the attack began. Captain, I think I understand how these machines decide which species to eliminate. They are programmed to target any civilization that demonstrates faster than light travel, advanced artificial intelligence, and organized resistance to alien threats. That describes humanity perfectly, Jake said while watching another human defense station explode under mechanical weapons fire. Yes, but there is something else, Lisa continued with excitement building in her voice. And the programming includes exceptions for species that possess certain quantum signatures. The machines are designed never to harm civilizations that have achieved what their creators called transcendence beyond physical existence. Paul Wilson looked up from his analysis of the captured debris with sudden understanding. Dr. R., you saying these machines can be fooled into thinking humanity has evolved beyond their target parameters? Lisa nodded while pulling up new data streams on her computer. The quantum signatures they are looking for indicate psychic abilities and consciousness, manipulation on a species-wide level. If we could generate those signatures artificially, the machines might recognize us as a transcended civilization and withdraw. Jake felt a spark of hope for the first time since the attack began, but he also realized that any solution would require humanity to change in ways they had never imagined. The mechanical warriors continued their merciless advance while human forces fell back to defensive positions and prepared for what might be their final stand against an enemy that had been designed to eliminate species exactly like them. The sky remained torn open above Earth as more ancient ships emerged from the void to join the harvest of human civilization. But in hidden laboratories and underground bunkers, human scientists were beginning to work on weapons that might save their species by forcing it to evolve beyond its current limitations. 2 weeks after the sky split open, humanity had learned to live like rats in the darkness beneath their ruined cities. Commander Kelly Nash crouched in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath New York while listening to radio reports from other resistance cells scattered across Earth and the surviving colonies. The mechanical harvesters controlled the surface now, but humans were proving harder to eliminate than the machines had calculated. The underground resistance network that Kelly commanded operated from hidden bases built in old mining tunnels, abandoned subway systems, and natural cave formations that the harvesters had not yet discovered. Every day brought new refugees fleeing from harvester sweeps, and every night brought desperate raids against machine installations to steal supplies and gather intelligence. Colonel Matt Thompson had established the largest resistance base in Nantasong, the Rocky Mountains, using a network of caves that connected to an old military bunker from the previous century. His forces included regular army units, civilian volunteers, and scattered groups of Marines who had escaped when their surface positions were overrun. They had learned to move only at night and to strike fast before disappearing back into the full underground warrens. Dr. Lisa Baker worked frantically in a hidden laboratory built deep beneath the ruins of Chicago while trying to perfect the quantum signature generator that might convince the harvesters to recognize humanity as a transcended species. Her equipment was salvaged from destroyed research facilities and cobbled together with spare parts that smuggling teams risked their lives to recover from harvester-controlled areas. The war had become a deadly game of hide and seek where the slightest mistake meant death or worse. Sergeant Rick Davis led special operations teams that struck at harvester resource collection sites where the machines were stripping useful materials from human cities. His soldiers had learned to exploit the predictable behavior patterns that made the ancient machines vulnerable to carefully planned ambushes. The harvesters followed the same search routines every time they sweep an area. Rick explained to a group of new recruits in an underground briefing room lit by battery-powered lamps. They scanned for electronic signatures first, then heat sources, then movement patterns. If you know the sequence, you can stay one step ahead of their sensors. The mechanical warriors were efficient hunters, but they had been programmed millions of years ago to fight civilizations that no longer existed. Guerrilla tactics confused their decision-making systems and forced them to adapt their programming in ways their creators had not anticipated. This gave the resistance small advantages that dedicated fighters like Rick Davis turned into opportunities for successful strikes. Captain Jake Morrison had brought the Liberation to a hidden base built inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. The ship served as a mobile command center for resistance operations throughout the solar system while staying far enough from Earth to avoid the main harvester fleets. From his position, Jake coordinated supply runs to isolated human settlements and evacuation missions that pulled survivors from harvester-controlled territories. Tony Miller had become the Resistance's primary intelligence analyst and spent his endless days monitoring harvester communications to predict their next moves. The machines used encrypted data streams that were nearly impossible to decode, but Tony had learned to recognize patterns in their transmission schedules that revealed operational priorities. Commander, the harvesters are planning something big, Tony reported during a secure communication session with Kelly Nash's underground command post. They have been moving resources toward major population centers, and their patrol schedules suggest they are preparing for a final sweep operation. Kelly studied the intelligence reports while planning evacuation routes for civilian refugees who were still hiding in the ruins of major cities. The harvesters seemed to be running out of patience with the human resistance and were preparing to strip mine Earth itself rather than continue the slow process of hunting down individual survivors. Dr. Lisa Baker made a crucial discovery while analyzing brain scans from resistance fighters who had survived close encounters with harvester warriors. Some humans were developing natural quantum resonance abilities under the extreme stress of the war. These individuals showed unusual neural activity patterns that resembled the signatures her equipment was designed to generate artificially. Captain, I think we have found the key to making the quantum signature generator work, Lisa reported to Jake Morrison during one of their encrypted communication sessions. Some humans are naturally developing the psychic abilities that the harvesters were programmed to recognize as signs of transcendence. Jake felt a spark of hope mixed with concern about what this development might mean for humanity's future. How many people are showing these abilities, Doctor? So far, I have confirmed the phenomenon in about 1% of resistance fighters who have had extended contact with harvester technology, Lisa replied while reviewing her test results. The subjects include Sam Foster from your engineering crew and Beth Moore from the communications department. Sam Foster was a young technician who had started experiencing strange visions during harvester attacks, while Beth Moore had begun demonstrating an uncanny ability to predict machine patrol patterns. Both volunteers had agreed to participate in Lisa's research, despite the risks involved in experimenting with unknown mental abilities. The harvesters continued adapting to human tactics and becoming more efficient at tracking resistance movements. They began converting captured human technology into more effective sensor systems and started using psychological warfare techniques designed to break human morale. The machines projected horrifying images of human defeat onto building walls and broadcast surrender demands that promised quick death for those who gave up fighting. Colonel Matt Thompson lost 3 resistance cells in a single week when harvester hunter-killer teams located their hiding places using new tracking methods. The machines had learned to follow supply routes back to hidden bases and were becoming better at predicting human behavior patterns. Time was running out for the scattered groups of survivors who continued fighting against impossible odds. Tony Miller intercepted harvester communications that revealed their ultimate plan for dealing with the human resistance problem. Commander, they are going to start strip mining operations on Earth within the next month. The machines have decided that eliminating individual humans is taking too long, so they are going to remove the entire planetary surface instead. Kelly Nash realized that humanity needed a miracle to survive the next phase of the Harvester campaign. The quantum signature generator was their only hope, but it required volunteers willing to risk their lives by linking their minds together in ways that no human had ever attempted. The process might save their species, or it might destroy the last remnants of human consciousness in a desperate gamble against extinction. In hidden laboratories and underground meeting rooms, the final preparations began for humanity's last desperate attempt to convince ancient machines that the human race had evolved beyond the need for physical existence. The harvesters controlled the surface and the sky, but they had not yet learned to hunt in the darkness where human determination burned brightest. The quantum resonance amplifier hummed with dangerous energy in Dr. Lisa Baker's hidden laboratory beneath the ruins of Chicago as humanity prepared for its final gamble against extinction. The device looked like a collection of salvaged computer parts connected by cables and jury-rigged power supplies, but it represented the last hope for human survival against the harvester fleet. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the center of the laboratory, surrounded by the neural interface equipment that would link his mind to hundreds of other volunteers scattered across Earth and the surviving colonies. His hands trembled slightly as he watched Lisa make final adjustments to the amplifier settings, while knowing that the process might kill him or drive him permanently insane. Captain, the harvester strip mining operations will begin in less than 6 hours, Tony Miller reported from his monitoring station. If we are going to try this, it has to be now before they start tearing the planet apart. Jake nodded and activated his communication link to the Resistance Network. All quantum-capable volunteers, this is Captain Morrison. We are beginning the consciousness linking procedure in 5 minutes. Everyone who volunteered for this mission knew the risks, so I will not repeat the warnings about neural damage. Death. Across the underground resistance network, nearly 300 humans with natural quantum resonance abilities prepared to risk their lives in the desperate attempt to convince the harvesters that humanity had transcended physical existence. The volunteers included Sam Foster and Beth Moore from Jake's crew, along with resistance fighters, civilian refugees, and even some children who had developed psychic abilities during the war. Commander Kelly Nash coordinated the final preparations. From her command post in the New York subway tunnels, while Colonel Matt Thompson readied his forces in the Rocky Mountain caves. Both military leaders knew their conventional weapons were useless against the harvesters, but they prepared to provide covering fire if the quantum experiment failed and the machines detected the hidden laboratory locations. Dr. Lisa Baker activated the resonance amplifier and immediately felt the strange sensation of other minds touching the edges of her consciousness. The volunteers throughout the resistance network were linking together through quantum fields that connected their thoughts and emotions in ways that human science barely understood. The process was painful and disorienting as individual identities began to blur together into something larger. Jake Morrison felt his awareness expand beyond his physical body as the neural interface connected him to the growing network of linked minds. He could sense Sam Foster's technical knowledge merging with Beth Moore's intuitive understanding of harvester behavior patterns, while hundreds of other human consciousnesses added their unique perspectives to the collective experience. The quantum signatures generated by the linked minds began registering on harvester sensors as the ancient machines prepared their final assault on human civilization. Deep within their mechanical programming systems, alarms activated as the readings matched criteria that had been hard-coded millions of years ago by their long-dead creators. Admiral Pete Sullivan watched from the bridge of his crippled flagship as the harvester fleet suddenly stopped its advance toward Earth. The massive ancient ships that had been moving with deadly purpose for weeks now floated motionless in space, while their onboard computers processed the unexpected quantum readings from the planet below. Sir, the harvesters have ceased all offensive operations, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez reported with amazement in her voice. Their weapon systems are powering down, and they appear to be running some kind of internal diagnostic routine. On Earth's surface, the mechanical warriors that had been systematically hunting human survivors suddenly stopped their search patterns and began transmitting data streams toward their mother ships. The machines had encountered quantum signatures that indicated the presence of a transcended civilization, and their programming demanded immediate verification of this impossible development. The linked human consciousness continued to grow stronger as more volunteers joined the network, despite the terrible risks involved. Several participants suffered fatal neural overloads, while others emerged from the process permanently changed by their connection to the collective human experience. But those who survived gained abilities that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. Jake Morrison found himself able to manipulate matter and energy through focused thought while maintaining his connection to hundreds of other minds. Sam Foster discovered he could interface directly with electronic systems using nothing but mental commands, while Beth Moore developed the ability to sense harvester locations across vast distances. Dr. Lisa Baker monitored the quantum field generators and watched in amazement as the readings climbed beyond anything her equipment had been designed to measure. Captain, the resonance levels are exceeding all theoretical limits. The harvester should be receiving clear transcendence signals by now. The harvester fleet began receiving confirmation from their ground-based units that the quantum signatures were genuine and represented a species that had achieved the evolutionary milestone their creators had designated as the boundary between physical and transcended existence. Ancient programming protocols that had remained dormant for millions of years activated to override the extermination directive. One by one, the massive harvester ships began withdrawing from human space as their prey. Automated systems recognized humanity as a transcended civilization that fell outside their operational parameters. The mechanical warriors on Earth's surface shut down their weapons and returned to their pods for immediate evacuation back to the fleet. Commander Kelly Nash emerged from the underground tunnels to watch the harvester pods lifting off from Earth's surface in organized formations that streaked toward the waiting ships in orbit. The machines that had seemed unstoppable just hours earlier were now retreating according to programming that valued transcended species above all other considerations. But the victory came at a terrible price that became clear as the quantum linked began to fade and the volunteers returned to individual consciousness. Nearly half of the participants had died during the linking process, while many others suffered permanent brain damage from the mental strain. Those who survived discovered they could no longer exist as completely separate individuals, but remained partially connected to the collective human consciousness. Jake Morrison stood on Earth's scarred surface, watching the last harvester ships disappear into hyperspace while struggling to maintain his individual identity within the expanded awareness that now included parts of hundreds of other minds. He could still think and act independently, but he was always aware of the collective human experience flowing beneath his personal thoughts. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez documented the aftermath of humanity's forced evolution while trying to understand what her species had become. Captain, we saved ourselves from extinction, but we are no longer the same humans who celebrated victory over the Zephyrian 6 months ago. Dr. Lisa Baker's final research notes reflected on the bitter irony of their survival. Humanity had been forced to evolve beyond recognition in order to convince ancient machines that they deserved to live. The harvesters had been designed to eliminate species that reached certain technological thresholds, but their creators had never imagined that a civilization might transcend those limitations through desperate necessity rather than natural development. Quantum-linked humans worked together to begin rebuilding their shattered world while learning to control abilities that made them something more and less than human. They had won the ultimate victory against extinction, but at the cost of becoming a species their ancestors would no longer recognize as entirely their own people.